Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Soulful Revolution, a podcast at the intersection of spiritual transformation and social change. I'm your host, Lauren Grubaugh Thomas, a priest, writer, spouse, and twin mama, living on Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute homelands in what's commonly called Colorado. My guest today is Ari Honarvar. Ari is the founder of Rumi with a View, dedicated to building bridges between the arts, social justice, and well-being. She dances with refugees and facilitates resilience through joy workshops on both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border. Her words have been featured in The Guardian, The Washington Post, Teen Vogue, and elsewhere, and she's the author of the critically acclaimed novel A Girl Called Rumi, and the best-selling oracle deck, Rumi's Gift. Ari, what a joy to be in conversation with you today.
I'm so excited. It's such a pleasure, Lauren. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. I want to begin by inviting you to reflect on the question of what it means to you to inhabit this intersection of spiritual transformation and social change.
They're so inextricably linked, aren't they? That this modernity's notion of compartmentalization is really bizarre, often unhelpful. So we have like play dates and preschools, and when it comes to young people, and we have senior homes for elders. We have all these silos for every aspect of society. And modernity has even separated mental health from physical health and even compartmentalized teeth as a separate entity and the rest of our body when it comes to insurance. So, yeah, communities and socializing used to be intergenerational, and even education was intergenerational and so enmeshed with everything else, with nature and with the divine. Our teeth used to be part of our body when we lived like this as humans, and we're not doing so well with it. So, yeah, when it comes to spirituality, it often isn't presented in the context of community and what's happening in the larger setting, the political climate, social justice, reproductive rights, and, coming from a tradition steeped in mystical poetry, the idea of seeing things or events as separate entities is just baffling. So yeah, it's all very related to me. It's hard to even see them as crossroads, but it's
Yeah.
one co-arising phenomena.
I wonder if we could begin by talking about your earliest years, because I have read you describe reciting Rumi before you learned to read or write. And so I'm curious about this thread of Rumi and Rumi's poetry that's been with you through your life. And perhaps if you could take us on a journey beginning with when you were very young of Rumi's poetry and who Rumi has been to you in your life. And maybe that can be a way to begin to catch a piece of your story.
The way that I describe it is that mystical poetry has been part of me long before I was born. That's how when people say, when did your relationship with Hafiz or Rumi or Farooq or Fardossi began? I say began long before I was born. Because I grew up in a culture, I was born into a culture in which poetry is as much part of a person as their very heartbeat. And we recite poems not just at weddings and funerals, but in conversations, even in resolving conflicts. And so I absolutely did know Rumi's poetry and Hafez's poetry, and I would respond to a question with a verse of Hafez or Sadi or Rumi, just as my parents and people who I knew did. And it was just so much part of us that they weren't even their own people, Sadi and Hafez, they were part of us. And so it was very shocking to come to the U.S. where poetry is just more a niche thing
Mm,
and
mm.
ubiquitous in every conversation or every part of life.
You grew up in Iran,
Yes, correct.
and you were there until you were how old?
14.
Oh, so you were steeped until a really formative age in Iranian culture
Yes.
in that place. Yeah. Say more about the uprooting, what that experience was like, particularly in terms of poetry and art. Like, what was the culture shock like for you in coming to the US?
It's so funny. I wrote an essay about it recently, and it's been published in a couple of places. And my mom sends me these text messages, and my speech to text app tries to decipher the voicemails, and it comes out as this word salad of poetry, and it just it inspired me to write an essay about how, as I'm saying, poetry was so much part of us. And then when I came to the US, and there was nothing to remind me of home. It's not like moving to a new country. It was like moving to a different planet. I would just look for the faces of my loved ones in the people that I would see at grocery stores, and I
Mm,
would try to. There is a famous Rumi poem about the cut reed, the reed that is cut off from the source, and the music that comes out of that is all about being in the state of uh, agony and sorrow, and you wanting to the world to hear about it all. But I didn't even speak English, so I had to learn English to be able to
mm,
say what I was feeling. And it was doubly hard because in Iran, our speech was freedom of speech was curtailed. We couldn't use our voice without fearing reprisals from the regime. And then here, where I had the freedom to speak, I couldn't. So I memorized 300 words a day, English words.
wow.
I watched soap operas. so and then I was just very surprised at the prevalence of evil twins in the American life. Is that a thing?
They must be everywhere.
So it was just like such a culture shock all around to be cut off from my mother tongue and my motherland and even my actual mother because I came here as an unaccompanied minor. So it's
Mm.
really, really difficult.
To be a young teen in that position is so vulnerable.
Mm.
And I wonder what helped you to stay connected to yourself, to your identity, to your family, to your culture over those years of transition.
Yeah, so I did have support, which was amazing. I lived with an American family for a while, and I learned English and became more accustomed to to all that. And my brother also supported me. He's 10 years older, and I hadn't seen him for 10 years because he came to the US right at the revolution, and then we couldn't see each other. So it was a bit of an anthropological experiment for us to live together after 10 years of not seeing one another. He left when I was like 4 years old.
Mm,
And but it's but I'm so grateful for the support that I have, and the Americans were very welcoming, very sweet people who met me. My poetry became like a vestigial organ, something that I didn't no longer needed because I was
mm,
just thriving once I got rooted into this new life of being. And the thing that really helped me with processing my trauma as a young child was something that was denied to me in Iran, which is music and dancing. Like we couldn't, music and dancing was illegal because of the strict interpretation of the Sharia law that was part of the Islamic takeover of Iran. And then when I came to the US, I could. sing or dance or do
Mm,
I wanted to. So I danced a lot, and that really helped me with my homesickness, with processing some of my trauma. And that's what I do now is I bring the element what I wanted when I came here and I didn't have, which is like a community of Iranians or other diaspora or other immigrants, and I wanted a community which I didn't have, which I'm offering other refugees now, and then music and dancing, which was denied to me as a child. So with refugees, I dance with them, we drum and we sing and we do art, and it's really healing.
that's so beautiful. I wonder with dancing, if you could describe for us more what those settings are like. Like what it well, first of all, how did you get into those spaces? What inspired you to step into those liminal spaces, those border spaces
Mm.
with immigrants, with refugees? And then paint for us an image of what an event looks like when you're dancing with immigrants, with refugees.
Mm. Thank you for that question. So to answer your first question, it was around 2015 when the anti-immigrant and anti-Muslim rhetorics and sentiment was just becoming more pervasive. And I started talking to a good friend who was the head of musical ambassadors of peace. And one of the things that he and his wife, Cameron Powers is his name, he passed away unfortunately a couple of years ago, but he and his wife went to Iraq right after the invasion, and they wouldn't let them in. They're like, we don't let Americans in. Where is your passport? Where's your visa? And so he took out his oud, which is a Middle Eastern guitar type instrument, stringed instrument. He started playing and singing Iraqi love songs, and his
Oh,
wife did. And he's like, "This is my visa. This is my visa." Or and they let him in. They let
oh, how beautiful.
they,
Mm.
it was like late at night, and the guy at the Jordan border went and woke up all the other people. He was like, "Come on and listen to this." They let them in, and they started singing Iraqi love songs on the streets of Baghdad. And people were like, "Oh my God, you're not contractors, you're not military, you're not here to exploit us or bomb us. You're what are you doing?" And they said, "We're
Mm.
reverse missionaries. We're here to listen and take
Wow.
your stories with us back to the U.S." And I just became I was very moved by that. So I started uh, doing these concerts with them with very stylized poetry, and this was this amazing international band that would have singing and this vocalizing, and I would do Rumi's poetry with stories of war as part of like edutainment to just
Mm.
show a side of Middle East that Americans weren't accustomed to, a part that is so inclusive and full of kindness and full of mysticism and so rich. And there was not a dry eye left in the crowd after we
I bet.
it was really, really a wonderful way to connect with the audiences. And when the Syrian refugees started coming at the height of that war, I asked them, I said, "What can I do to help these people?" And Cameron said, "Start a drum circle." And I was like, "What?" It's like, isn't that what hippies do in Berkeley? And it's like, and then it turned out after studying it, and now I'm like looking at neuroaesthetics and how our bodies respond to different types of aesthetic experiences and music and rhythm, how incredibly healing drumming and dancing and singing together is. So that's how it started. I started running a drum circle with a fellow musical ambassador who was from Iraq. So I was from Iran. She was from the Kurdistani part of Iraq. Our families like killed each other during Iran-Iraq war,
Wow.
and now we're here as musical ambassadors of peace, making space for other immigrants and other refugees. We worked with um, freed ISIS sex slaves and Afghan refugees under Taliban, all these women and children. It was
Mm.
incredibly healing. And then during the first Trump administration, they weren't letting any, during Muslim ban, they weren't allowing any more refugees from Middle East and Africa that I was working with. So I kind of turned my attention to the border. And actually, at first, I started reporting on the border.
Oh.
And then during the child separation, I had this one piece that was just so horrible, because one of the activists had given me a piece of paper, and it was stuck in the backpack of one of the kids who was separated. And he it said, so she had been sexually abused in the detention center. She was 6 years old, from Guatemala, and
Oh.
she had to sign a paper at 6 years old to say that it was her responsibility to stay away from her abuser. And
Oh, horrifying.
her signature was this broken D, and I published that for the Nation. That's one of the oldest magazines in the country, the Nation, and it just went viral. All these senators started, tweeting about it. Even Trump wrote a tweet about it. And it was just, and it ended up closing that detention center,
Wow.
and that whole system
That's remarkable.
collapsed. There were a lot of other things that led to that, but this was one of the pieces also. But then when I was doing that, I was like, why am I not bringing, music to these folks who are
Mm.
also having so much trauma and being so dehumanized by our policies. So I started taking my um, musicians and my drums to all these makeshift shelters for
Mm.
refugees in Tijuana and Mexicali, and I've been doing that for the better part of a decade now.
Wow. Has that work been able to continue over the last couple of months with the new policies surrounding the border and migration?
So one of the things that happened during COVID, during lockdown, was that these sessions have been so healing and so transformative that the shelter directors were like, "We need to dance. What are we gonna do when you can't come here?" So we started doing
Mm.
Zoom, where I would be in my living room, and 300 refugees are stuck in a shelter. But we did that every week, and it was a way to connect. It was a way that we would hug each other through the screen, and I would blow kisses, and it was, and ever since we've continued doing that. And I go there every few months when I gather enough donations for them to bring. And the last time I was there was in February, and I took 3 volunteers with me, and it was, again, it's always a really transformative experience for everyone
Mm.
in that I bring over there, because it's just like there is no me or you, there's no I'm a volunteer, I'm a receiver or giver. It's just all of us are just celebrating like we were meant to, like our ancestors did when when we were in community, and we play the songs that the refugees have grown up with, that they makes their children feel safe, so they can um, really have a moment of using joy as fuel and as a source of resilience. And then afterwards, I stay with the people who have been through, have been particularly traumatized, and we do some resilience building exercises together. Or sometimes I just sit there as they tell me their story, if that's what they want. There's no obligation for them and I always say, it's like, we don't have to get to anything that upsets you necessarily. It's up to you. And sometimes it's like, no, I need to get this off my chest, I want to say this. And And the stories that I've heard have been absolutely horrific.
Mm-hmm.
And the scars on people's bodies and the psychological scars are just awful.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
As you're sharing about joy, I'm reminded of a recent conversation I had with Dr. Tanmeet Sethi, who has researched gratitude and joy. She's an integrated physician, integrated medicine physician. And one of the things that she told me is that suffering equals pain times resistance, and that gratitude helps to reduce resistance to pain and thereby reduces suffering.
Mm.
And what I hear in your examples of being in community and dancing with refugees is the way that joy and gratitude for life, for the gift of life, for the gift of community helps to reduce the suffering that people experience, even as they're still in the midst of incredibly painful situations.
Mm. Yeah, and I love how that formula was it pain times resistance? Is that,
Yeah.
yeah, so the way that we see, like that, I've also heard that joy um, shared doubles
Mm.
your happiness, and suffering shared halves your pain. And what I see in action when we go to these settings, when there are these kids in the corner shivering from the trauma that I've experienced, and all of a sudden you see them literally thaw out
Wow.
and come and dance. And at the end, and then the parent, so the kids are sitting there, they see the parents and the adults who've been so worried, preoccupied, traumatized, depressed, anxious, put everything aside and they're having fun. So
Mm.
it must be safe out here. If we're having
Yes.
fun, my heart feels safe for me.
Mm.
Fun. So then they come and start slowly getting in and doing a few moves. And then the parents and the adults see these kids who have been shivering.
Mm.
They're like, they're dancing, so their joy
Wow.
is amplified. And
Mm.
then the kids see the parents' joy amplified. And so this is this feedback loop that is just incredible. So everything that is happening for us individually, when we do it in community, is amplified a million folds.
Mm.
Are
Mm.
That's why concerts are so transformative for people that are spending like hundreds of dollars right, because you have that collective energy
Yeah.
around you. All of you are feeling and singing the same thing, and all your 70 trillion cells are listening to this harmony, everything, all these bodies being harmonized around you, and it's just so ecstatic.
Mm. I've been a dancer my whole life since I was very small, and some of my earliest memories are of dancing, of being in the living room, spinning and spinning and spinning till I fell over, and it was such an ecstatic experience. And I would say I didn't have the language at 3 or 2, but it was a spiritual experience,
Mhm.
this mind, body, soul, wholly integrated experience. And and so I wonder about when you speak of resiliency, what gifts does this practice of dance give to people who are going to continue to be in really difficult circumstances? Like that spiritual, emotional, embodied experience that they have on occasion. What is the ripple effect of that for folks
Mm.
long term? What have you observed?
Yeah, are you familiar with the word zikr? Zikr.
No.
It's a prayer. It's a Sufi prayer, zikr, something that you repeat. And so dancing itself has become this zikr, a serenity of
Mm,
sorts for me. And the
wow.
way that it invites me to pivot and flow with what I am not controlling, It reminds me to summon every part of me to what I must change, leaving nothing small or trivial behind. And it points me to the silence and the stillness from which movement arises and music emanates. So when it comes to the resilience, I see this in people. Something that happens for us is that naturally we have a negativity bias. Our ancestors saw something, a predatory um, animal or a poisonous plant, and they got injured or someone got killed. So it had to make a profound impression on them, and it made an profound impression on their ancestors, on their descendants too, to avoid uh, these types of situations. And
Right, to
to
survive.
survive, it's very, very useful. But right now, it's become, as Rick Hansen, the one of the neurobiologists I interviewed, he says that the negativity bias now is a bug. It's no longer a feature; it's a bug.
Mm,
So, or it's not a bug; it's a feature. It's just basically we've become so used to looking at what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong. Are always, out of 100 good things or neutral things that happen and one bad thing throughout the day, we're only looking at that one bad thing and just
just fixated.
fix
Yeah.
fixate it. So what part of my practice is resilience through joy, and this is what I do with frontline workers, this is what I do with traumatized refugees, is to keep very gently bring back our attention to what's right. To what's right. There's plenty of things that are right, even in the worst of circumstances, right?
Mm,
So this practice, when we're dancing, um, it's in our blood, it's in our DNA to dance. When people say I can't dance, it's just no. Everyone knows how to dance. Um, there's It's kind of like saying I can't breathe or I can't, you know, my heart doesn't beat. It's just movement that is movement press feeling, or
mm,
that's it. So it could be, doesn't have to be aesthetically pleasing, but you have a certain emotion and you're putting it to movement, and that's dance. When we do that, so much just somatically, we release so much and our orientation changes. So rather than
mm.
just focused forward and tunnel visioned, we're spinning and we become 360 sometimes.
Oh, I love that.
You
Yes.
know, and just doing these tiny things start rewiring our brain, rewiring our nervous system, and we start looking at what's the beautiful things that are around us. Or
Mm,
we look at someone who's doing a really fun dance move and we naturally mimic what they're doing. And that brings
mm.
both of us more joy. So it becomes a way, a container in which we are cultivating what's right rather than focusing on what's wrong. And the
Mm,
more we do this, the more we want to do it because it feels really good. The
yeah.
shelter directors tell me that after we're done with a session, like headaches are gone. People
Mm,
don't feel depressed or despondent or worried, the way that they used to. Of course, their situation is terrible, but this kind of just is a little bit like a natural antidepressant or natural anti-inflammatory where the pains shrink. And
mm,
and
mm,
and then people are much more likely to cooperate with each other. Not The bickering kind of just dissipates when you are in this mode, and you start seeing each other in a better light when you're looking at what's right. And it lasts for several days, almost a week. I mean,
Yeah.
it happens that for the volunteers that I take them there too,
Mm.
and it happens every time. So that's why there are several universities that are interested in what we're doing, because it's such a remarkable transformation within just a couple of hours of dancing or an hour of dancing and hanging out together.
I wonder if there's a poem that comes to mind as you're talking about these spaces that you inhabit with such joy and care and tenderness for the people that you are attending to through movement. If there's a poem you might share with us, yours or Rumi's or someone else's.
از محبت خارها گل می شوند، از محبت سرکه ها مل می شوند. It's a verse of Rumi that says, from that, from your loving kindness, from being together, all thorns turn to flowers,
Mm.
all vinegars turn into wine.
Mm.
And I love that, because you can see the flower, you can see the thorn, you can
Yeah.
see the vinegar, or you can see the wine that it will become. So it's
Mm.
all about that change of perspective.
Mm.
And that shows up so much. سخن تازه بگو تا که جهان تازه شود. Tell me a new story and the whole world will become new.
I wonder what it feels like for you to be dancing, to be leading music, while women in Iran are punished for attempting to do that. I'm thinking of the young women just in the last couple years who have been arrested for singing or for dancing, and yet they continue to make videos of dances in public places and of songs, resistance songs and love songs. And so I wonder, within your body, in the space that you inhabit in the US, what that's like to observe those women who are still in Iran struggling to be able to sing, to dance, to make art.
Mm. Yes, I've been in touch with a lot of activists there. And one of the things that I did during the 2022 uprising, Woman Life Freedom Uprising, which is in Farsi Zan Zindagi Azadi, is that I started a Dance for Freedom campaign, and people from all over the world submitted videos of themselves dancing in solidarity with the Iranian women. And
I think I saw this, Ari. This rings a bell. Yeah.
7 continents.
Wow.
Even
Wow.
I had a scientist in Antarctica
Incredible.
with their colleagues. They held up. They have really bad internet and they can only do it. So everyone had to like collect their internet bucks or whatever and be like, all right, we're not going to use the internet until this period is over, so we can
Wow.
post this video. And they did a little dance, and they had a dance for freedom in solidarity of women for Iran. I had a colleague, a musical ambassador colleague, who dances with freed Congolese child soldiers, and that's
Mm.
also a really inspiring story. And he posted the Congolese child free. They
Oh.
were dancing in solidarity for freedom in Iran. The people in Tijuana shelters, all these kids were dancing in solidarity. And it was just so beautiful to every day was like Christmas for me, to open my phone and
Oh,
see from
I
which part
bet.
of the world people have been, just doing something that is so good for you, which is dance, doing it
Mm.
for a really brilliant cause, which is freedom. Yeah, but the struggle still continues. I'm writing a piece right now about that.
I'm curious how poetry found its way back into your life. You mentioned it having become a vestigial organ at a certain place, a certain point in your life as you were acclimating to life in the US.
Mm.
And I hear now this interweaving of poetry and dance and music, and I wonder, yeah, what was the reemergence of poetry? Where did that come in your life?
I think it was in my 20s, and I was, going through a really difficult time. I was really depressed. I was heartbroken, and all of a sudden, I just kind of felt this tug uh,
Mm.
from in my heart, and it was like, I've always been here and just been waiting for you to come back to me. And it was just so immediate at that point, where I would go to, like, I would just be invited to a gathering or a party, and someone would ask me a question, and I would start responding in Farsi, in poetry, to them.
Mm.
And it was like, people were, to my surprise, didn't say, "Oh my God, she's gone mad, let's get her out of here." They said, "That sounds so beautiful. Can you translate it for us?" So that kind of started my journey of translating Rumi. I never felt like a translation could hold a candle to the original. So that's why I started these calligrams, about kind of like the one that you're seeing here, where I incorporated the Farsi words in every painting that I made.
Oh,
And
wow.
the Farsi words of the poem would make the shape of the image, and that's how the whole Rumi's gift oracle card, like those images,
Okay.
about.
Wow. And so you bring the visual art into it also.
Yeah, I just felt like just the words alone wasn't gonna be enough. I needed another medium to say how beautiful and how impactful these sentences, these stanzas were, and how, like, the just the I wanted to also honor the Farsi words. And
Hmm.
there's something really beautiful and sacred in the words themselves. So I wanted to incorporate that in all the images as well.
Oh, that's so beautiful. For our listeners who may not be familiar with Rumi, I wonder if you could share a bit of history and help us understand within Persian culture the importance I guess I know Rumi plays such a central role as other Sufi poets do, like Hafiz.
Mm.
Um, just to help us understand, like poets in the U.S., I don't think play the same role in terms of that being a common way of speaking to one another. Like we're not constantly drawing upon Dickinson or Whitman. There may be circles where people do that. I don't know, like English majors.
Right.
But it's not the same sort of culture in terms of drawing on these historic words that continue to have so much life, so much vitality
Mm.
in the culture.
Yeah, Rumi um, is actually not the most famous poet in Iran. Probably Hafez, I would say, and Hafez, was one of my first loves, and I
Mm.
knew a lot of his poetry by heart before I came to the U.S. And but I think the reason that I got attracted more to Rumi was because he was so much easier to translate. uh,
Oh.
like, Hafiz is like got so many double meanings,
Mm.
and we finally, someone was able to translate him in the way that I thought found to be really wonderful. And I wrote the foreword for that. It's a Buddhist Zen master, Gary Gach, and Irfan Mujib, who is in Iran, and they came up with this translation, and it's just really, really beautiful. But they did it. They had a method about it, which is very innovative, because you can't just straight up translate it, and does not translate.
So hard to translate poetry. Yeah.
Yeah, especially Hafez is just, yeah,
Yeah.
takes some magic to do that, and these guys were able to do that. But
Wow.
with Rumi, it's a little bit more accessible. So I
Hmm.
wanted to be able to share that with the my American friends and family. So I wanted to keep with Rumi, and he was a 13th century mystic and poet. He was a refugee from Balkh, which is part of the Persian Empire, but it's in current day Afghanistan.
Hmm.
Um, and he moved to Turkey, and he is buried in Anatolia, in Konya. And so then at some point he was a scholar. He was a Islamic scholar, just like his ancestors were, and he meets this kind of a curmudgeon character named Shams, who ends up transforming his life, and he just abandons his scholarly ways and becomes this mad poet, and he composes 10,000 poems, and he doesn't even write any of them down. He's just like constantly
Oh, wow.
like reciting them, and someone's following him around and describing all of that.
I didn't know that part of his story was that he was a refugee, and how apt in terms of the work that you now do, that this refugee from the 14th century from Afghanistan moved to Iran is now accompanying you in the work that you do with refugees from all over the world.
Definitely, there's definitely a lot of parallels, and that's why I named my website Rumi with a View, because this
Mm,
has so much of that in there.
mm. I want to hear more about perspective. You've just mentioned Rumi with a View, and so this makes me think of some of what you shared earlier in terms of even the way that spinning invites a new perspective. And
Mm.
there's so many people right now who are despairing and discouraged and depressed about the state of the world and our political situation, and so I wonder in terms of the hope that you might offer through your poetry, through dance, through all the gifts that you bring, what a perspective shift might be that you would invite.
Mm. Yeah, just kind of saying love. I think it was Bell Hooks who said, like, I'm paraphrasing, that if once you see love as an action, then you become
Mm,
responsible, you become accountable and responsible for it. So it's just that shift, that love is not a feeling but an action. So the action, what we do out in the world, whatever small or big it might be, it is the antidote to hopelessness once we do something with love in
mm,
the service of another. And joy is also, rather than looking at it as a feeling, if we look at it as a fuel that sustains us, that
oh,
allows us to move forward. And again, I deal with a lot of burnout, a lot of activists, a lot of frontline workers who just hit a breaking point. And part of the way that we can shift our perspective is that people say, well, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And I would say, well, let's not even look at it as that, because a marathon is really exhausting and not a lot of us want to do it. Um,
yeah.
but how about a relay? If we look at
mm,
a relay where we rest, we take care of each other, we pass the baton, we keep going, and so we can just be there for the long haul and not just
mm,
for this very moment. And our energy is so precious right now. So we need to do what we can um, to honor it and to treat it with the that part of us that wants rest with the
Mm.
that it deserves.
What are some of the ways in which you practice rest?
I wrote another piece that's coming out about how I have given up screens for entertainment. Yeah, so I'm not looking at a screen. I give my eyes a rest in the
Mm.
and on Sundays, it's completely device free. And same thing with the evenings. I'm just kind of being, or at least as much as I can. I mean, I have to be responsible and with some messages with family. I have an elderly mother and etc. So it's but for entertainment, I'm so much more cognizant about shifting my if I'm wanting to lie down, I lie down with my eyes closed. So I'm just
Yeah.
completely in that receptive form of rest, and I'm not glued to a screen when I'm doing it. And if I want to do some yoga, I'm doing that. So being a little bit more intentional about how to rest. So not just rest, but how to
Mm.
do it. And also in the evenings when I do go to bed, I get my 9 hours of sleep, which is kind of,
Wow.
I'm a unicorn that way, you know.
Yes.
Because
That's
when I go
wonderful.
to these different when I do these workshops, I ask people how many people are getting enough rest. It's every year it's like fewer and fewer people are sleeping at
Mm.
night, and it's a recipe for disaster. We have to sleep better. We when we can. I
Mm.
mean, I understand there's people who have chronic illness, people who are going through menopause, or they have newborns, and just, you
Sure.
know, interruptions, but we can't allow it to be for those of us who are not in that category. We can be a little bit more vigilant about it.
Mm.
This one is kind of around that. It's about just putting our mind at ease, and I'll say it in
Mm.
Farsi first. دوش دیوانه شدم، عشق مرا دید و بگفت آمدم نعره مزن جام مدر هیچ مگو. Last night I became mad. Love saw me and said, don't shout, don't wail. I am here. Just be silent.
It's been such a gift to be in conversation with you, Ari, and to hear about your life's work. Thank you for sharing your joy and your resilience with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Lauren. It was such a pleasure.